Why discipline beats motivation. Marcus Aurelius knew this. Every morning, millions of people wake up believing the same lie. I just need more motivation. They wait to feel inspired. They wait for more energy. They wait for the perfect mood. They wait until they finally feel ready. And while they're waiting, days become weeks. Weeks become months. Months quietly become years. Most people never realize what is actually happening. They think they're waiting for motivation. In reality, they're waiting for permission to become the person they already know they should be. Modern culture has convinced us that motivation comes first. Watch another motivational video. Read another inspiring quote. Listen to another speech. Feel excited. Then take action. It sounds reasonable. It feels true. And that is exactly why so many people spend years making the same promises without ever changing their lives. Marcus Aurelius lived in a completely different world. He ruled an empire under constant pressure. He woke each day knowing that war could break out before sunrise. A deadly plague was spreading through Rome. Political betrayal surrounded him. He buried children he loved. Every day demanded impossible decisions. Yet when you read Meditations, you never find him asking a single question that dominates modern self-improvement. How do I become motivated? The question simply doesn't exist, because Marcus Aurelius had already discovered something far more powerful. Motivation is a feeling. Feelings are temporary. They change with the weather. They change after one bad night's sleep. They disappear after a difficult conversation. They vanish the moment life becomes uncomfortable. If your future depends on motivation, then your future depends on something that was never designed to stay. Marcus Aurelius refused to build his life on something so unstable. Instead, in Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 5, Paragraph 1, he reminds himself that when it is time to rise, a human being must get up and do the work he was created to do. Not because it feels pleasant, not because inspiration suddenly appears, because it is his duty. That single idea dismantles one of the biggest myths in modern self-improvement. Discipline is not the reward for motivation. Discipline is the reason motivation eventually appears. The strongest men in history were rarely the most motivated. They simply became the men who acted whether motivation showed up or not. By the end of this video, you'll understand why chasing motivation may be the very thing preventing you from building real self-discipline. More importantly, you'll discover the timeless Stoic principle that allowed Marcus Aurelius to remain calm, consistent, and mentally unbreakable, while the world around him seemed to be falling apart. Because once you understand the difference between motivation and discipline, you'll never negotiate with your excuses in quite the same way again. If motivation were enough, everyone would already be living the life they dream about. Think about your own life. How many times have you watched a motivational video and felt like you could conquer the world? For a few hours, everything feels possible. You promise yourself that this time will be different. You'll wake up earlier. You'll start training. You'll stop procrastinating. You'll finally become disciplined. Then tomorrow arrives. The excitement fades. Your energy drops. The alarm feels heavier. The workout suddenly seems optional. The work can always wait until later. Nothing around you has changed. The only thing that changed was the feeling. And that is the trap. Most people believe they fail because they lack discipline. They don't. They fail because they trust motivation to make decisions it was never meant to make. Motivation is emotional. Discipline is structural. One changes from hour to hour. The other remains steady regardless of circumstances. Imagine trying to build a house on wet sand. For a moment, everything seems stable. Then the ground shifts beneath you. That is exactly what happens when your habits are built on motivation. Every difficult day becomes a reason to stop. Every uncomfortable emotion becomes permission to quit. Every bad morning becomes another excuse to postpone the life you promised yourself. The Stoics understood something that modern psychology now confirms. Emotions are temporary. Systems endure. That is why Marcus Aurelius never asked himself, "Do I feel like doing this today?" He asked a far more powerful question. What is the right thing to do today? One question searches for comfort. The other creates character. That single shift separates people who constantly start over from those who quietly become unstoppable. But this raises an even deeper question. If Marcus Aurelius never depended on motivation, what kept him moving through war, grief, betrayal, and responsibilities that would have broken most people? Imagine opening your eyes before sunrise, not knowing whether your empire will still be at peace by nightfall. Imagine receiving reports of another battle at the frontier, thousands of soldiers depending on your decisions, entire cities waiting for your judgment. Now imagine that, while carrying all of that responsibility, a deadly plague is spreading across your empire. People are dying. Fear is everywhere. Political betrayal surrounds you. Trusted friends become enemies. The weight never disappears. This was not fiction. This was the daily reality of Marcus Aurelius. Yet when you read Meditations, something remarkable happens. You never meet a man searching for motivation. You meet a man training his own mind, again, and again, and again. He never writes, "I hope tomorrow I feel stronger." He never says, "I'll wait until life becomes easier." He never asks, "How can I feel more motivated?" Instead, he asks a far more uncomfortable question. What kind of man does this moment require me to be? That question changes everything, because it shifts your attention away from your emotions and toward your character. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 5, Paragraph 1, he reminds himself that when it is time to rise, he must not remain in bed seeking comfort, because he was not born merely to sleep. He was born to fulfill his duty as a human being. Notice what he doesn't say. He doesn't promise that duty will feel exciting. He doesn't claim discipline becomes easy. He simply accepts that responsibility comes before comfort. That is why Marcus Aurelius became mentally unbreakable, not because he experienced less fear, not because he suffered less pain, not because he possessed extraordinary motivation. He simply refused to let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. Most people spend their lives asking, "How do I feel today?" Marcus Aurelius asked, "What is the right thing to do today?" One question protects comfort. The other builds character, and that reveals the hidden foundation of every disciplined life. Marcus Aurelius wasn't relying on willpower. He had built something much stronger, a system. Most people spend their lives trying to become stronger. The Stoics spent their lives trying to make strength unnecessary. That sounds strange at first, but think about it. How much energy do you waste making the same decision every single day? Should I wake up now or sleep a little longer? Should I train today or skip just this once? Should I start working or check my phone first? Every unnecessary decision drains a little more of your attention, a little more of your discipline, a little more of your self-control. Marcus Aurelius understood something extraordinary. The goal was never to win the same battle every morning. The goal was to stop fighting it altogether. That is what a system does. A system removes negotiation. It replaces uncertainty with standards. It replaces hesitation with routine. It replaces emotion with action. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't wake up asking yourself whether you feel motivated enough. You don't debate. You don't negotiate. You simply do it. Not because brushing your teeth requires incredible discipline, because it has become part of who you are. That is how real self-discipline is built. Not through heroic moments, through ordinary actions repeated until they become automatic. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 6, paragraph 12, Marcus reminds himself that excellence is achieved by acting according to reason, again and again, regardless of changing circumstances. That is the hidden system. Every action becomes a habit. Every habit becomes a standard. Every standard strengthens your identity. Eventually, discipline stops feeling like something you force. It becomes something you are. Now imagine two men. Both decide they want to become disciplined. The first relies on motivation. The second builds a system. One asks himself every morning, "Do I feel like doing this today?" The other removed that question from his life months ago. One keeps making decisions. The other already made the decision. Months later, their lives no longer look the same. Not because one man was stronger, because one kept negotiating. The other stopped negotiating. That is the hidden power of discipline. It quietly removes thousands of unnecessary battles from your life. But even the strongest system eventually faces its greatest opponent. Not failure, not difficulty, your own emotions. Your emotions are real, but they were never meant to lead your life. Think about how many different versions of yourself exist in a single day. You wake up feeling confident. An hour later, one unexpected problem appears. Your confidence disappears. By the afternoon, you're optimistic again. At night, doubt quietly returns. Now ask yourself one simple question. Which version of you should be making your most important decisions? The confident one? The anxious one? The exhausted one? The frustrated one? If your emotions keep changing, why would you trust them to determine your future? This is one of the greatest psychological lessons hidden within Stoicism. The Stoics never tried to eliminate emotions. They understood that emotions are part of being human. Fear, excitement, frustration, joy, all of them will come. All of them will leave. The mistake is not feeling them. The mistake is allowing them to become your leader. Marcus Aurelius knew that emotions arrive without asking permission. But decisions, those belong to you. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 8, paragraph 48, he reminds himself that the mind always has the power to choose its judgment, no matter what happens outside. That is where real freedom begins. Imagine driving through a violent storm. Rain is hitting the windshield. The road is difficult to see. The wind pushes the car from side to side. Do you abandon the steering wheel because the weather changed? Of course not. You hold it even tighter. Your emotions work exactly the same way. Some days they whisper, "Rest today." Other days they say, "You've already done enough." Sometimes they convince you that tomorrow will be a better day to begin. They sound convincing, but they are only temporary weather passing through your mind. That is why disciplined people are not emotionless. They simply refuse to let temporary emotions make permanent decisions. Feelings are excellent passengers. They can warn you. They can teach you. They can even protect you. But they should never drive. Reason holds the steering wheel. Discipline chooses the direction. Character decides the destination. The moment your principles become stronger than your emotions, your consistency becomes stronger than your circumstances. And once that happens, something extraordinary begins to change. You stop reacting to life and start leading it. If I asked you what creates confidence, most people would give the wrong answer. They would say, believe in yourself. Think positively. Visualize success. The Stoics believed something very different. Confidence is not something you think, it is something you earn. Marcus Aurelius never became mentally unbreakable because he repeated inspiring words to himself. He became unbreakable because day after day, He proved that he could trust his own actions. That changes everything. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, you collect evidence. Every time you train when you don't feel like it, you collect evidence. Every time you finish the work you wanted to postpone, you collect evidence. Every difficult conversation you choose not to avoid becomes another piece of evidence. At first, those moments seem insignificant, almost invisible, but your mind never ignores them. Without realizing it, your brain keeps asking the same silent question. Can I trust this man? Every disciplined action answers, yes. Every excuse answers, not yet. That is why discipline becomes easier over time. Not because the work becomes easier, because the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. One promise kept becomes 2. 2 become 10. 10 become 100. Eventually, you stop hoping you'll become disciplined. You already have proof that you are. This is where most people make a life-changing mistake. They spend years chasing motivation, when they should have been collecting evidence. Motivation disappears. Evidence remains. Motivation changes with your mood. Evidence changes your identity. Marcus Aurelius understood that character is never built by what you intend to do. It is built by what you repeatedly prove you are willing to do. That is why every ordinary decision matters. Not because today's decision changes your life, but because today's decision changes the man who will make tomorrow's decision. That is how discipline quietly becomes part of your identity. Not through one extraordinary act, through thousands of small promises that nobody sees, except you. And once you become the kind of man who trusts himself, something unexpected happens. Discipline no longer feels like a sacrifice, it becomes freedom. For most of your life, you've probably been told that discipline is restrictive, that disciplined people sacrifice too much, that they miss out on life, that they live by rules while everyone else enjoys freedom. It sounds convincing until you look more closely. Who is truly free? The man who cannot stop checking his phone every 5 minutes? The man who promises himself he'll start tomorrow, every single day? The man who loses his temper over the smallest inconvenience? The man who gives in to every craving, every distraction, and every impulse? That isn't freedom. That is dependence. Dependence on comfort. Dependence on emotion. Dependence on pleasure. Dependence on circumstances. The Stoics saw freedom differently. Epictetus taught that no man is free if he is not master of himself. Think about those words. The greatest prison is rarely built with walls. It is built with habits you no longer control. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than anyone. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 6, paragraph 30, he reminds himself that true freedom begins when the mind governs itself instead of being governed by external events. That changes the meaning of discipline forever. Discipline is not waking up early because someone forces you. It is choosing your future instead of your comfort. Discipline is not forcing yourself to train. It is refusing to let laziness decide who you become. Discipline is not eliminating pleasure. It is refusing to let pleasure become your master. Every disciplined decision breaks another invisible chain. Every promise you keep strengthens your independence. Every impulse you master gives you back another piece of your freedom. That is why disciplined people often appear calm, not because life is easier for them, but because they are no longer controlled by every emotion that enters their minds. They have learned to lead themselves. And the man who can lead himself cannot easily be controlled by anything else. This is the paradox Marcus Aurelius understood. Discipline does not take your freedom away. It gives it back. The moment you stop becoming a prisoner of your emotions, You become the author of your own life. And once that happens, the future begins to separate two kinds of men: the man who keeps waiting and the man who quietly keeps his word. Imagine two men standing at exactly the same point in life. They are the same age. They have similar opportunities, similar dreams, similar fears. Neither of them is more intelligent. Neither of them is more talented. Neither of them begins with an advantage. Every morning, both wake up with the same decision to make. One waits until he feels motivated. The other gets up before his emotions have a chance to vote. The difference seems insignificant. One skips today's workout. The other finishes it. One delays an important conversation. The other has it. One promises himself he'll begin next Monday. The other quietly begins today. Nothing dramatic happens. No applause. No instant transformation. If you looked at their lives after a week, you probably wouldn't notice any difference. After a month, the gap is still small. But time is doing something neither man can see. Every decision is casting a vote for the person each of them is becoming 5 years later. Their lives no longer resemble one another. One still talks about the life he wants. The other is already living it. Not because life treated him more kindly, not because he had more motivation, because every ordinary day he made one ordinary decision. Again, and again, and again. Marcus Aurelius understood that greatness is never built in extraordinary moments. It is built in ordinary moments that almost nobody notices. In Meditations of Marcus Aurelius, Book 4, paragraph 49, he reminds himself that a person's life becomes the reflection of what he repeatedly thinks and repeatedly does. That is why the strongest men rarely look extraordinary while they are becoming strong. Their victories are invisible. No one applauds the man who gets out of bed when nobody is watching. No one celebrates the workout completed before sunrise. No one notices the difficult decision made in silence. But those are the moments that shape a life. While others wait for inspiration, the disciplined man quietly builds character. While others chase shortcuts, he quietly builds standards. While others dream about becoming someone different, he quietly becomes that man. This is why discipline almost never feels spectacular. Most days, it feels ordinary. Sometimes it even feels boring. But time has a remarkable habit. It quietly rewards the man who keeps showing up, and it quietly exposes the man who keeps waiting. Eventually, the disciplined man no longer needs to convince anyone that he has changed. His life becomes the evidence. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson Marcus Aurelius left behind. Your future will never be shaped by the days you felt inspired. It will be shaped by the ordinary days when you chose discipline anyway. One day, you'll wake up and notice something strange. The alarm will ring. The work will still be difficult. Your responsibilities will still be waiting for you. Life will not suddenly become easier, but something inside you will have changed. You will no longer sit in bed negotiating with yourself. You will no longer wait for the perfect mood. You will no longer ask whether you feel motivated. You will simply stand up and begin. Not because discipline became effortless, because it became part of who you are. That is the transformation Marcus Aurelius understood. He never waited for the world to become less demanding. He trained himself to become stronger than its demands. The battles around him never stopped. The uncertainty never disappeared. The losses never became easier to bear. Yet he continued to act according to reason instead of emotion, duty instead of comfort, character instead of convenience. That is why his words still survive nearly 2,000 years later. Not because he taught people how to feel better, because he taught them how to become better. Perhaps that is the greatest misunderstanding about discipline. People think discipline changes your schedule. It doesn't. Discipline changes your identity. And once your identity changes, your decisions change. Your habits change. Your standards change. Eventually, your entire life changes. That is why motivation will never be enough. Motivation helps you begin. Discipline ensures you continue. Motivation makes promises. Discipline keeps them. Motivation is loud. Discipline is quiet. But in the end, it is always discipline that writes the story of your life. So tomorrow morning, when comfort invites you to stay where you are, when your emotions whisper, "Not today," ask yourself the same question Marcus Aurelius asked nearly 2,000 years ago. What is the right thing to do? Then do it. Not once. Not when you feel inspired. Every single day. Because the life you want is not built on the days you feel motivated. It is built on the days you choose discipline anyway. If this video helped change the way you think about discipline, subscribe to the Discipline Code. Every week, you'll discover timeless Stoic wisdom to build self-discipline, strengthen mental toughness, master emotional control, and become the kind of man who keeps his word, even when nobody is watching. Because the strongest men never waited for motivation. They became the kind of men who no longer needed it.